Welcome to the Under the Hat podcast,
the show where we talk about everything and anything that is top of mind in education.
The goal is to provide meaningful conversations to what is currently happening in our classrooms.
Stories, pains,
moments of success.
We want to hear it all.
Hey friends, welcome back to Under the Hat. We are sitting in episode 61, and I am not alone to start this off. So Sophie, I've missed you. We've missed you. Thanks for penciling us into your busy schedule. How are you?
I'm fantastic. My schedule is not so busy anymore.
Yeah. How's school going?
School is going fantastic. I am loving everything that I'm learning. I'm getting really excited about all of I actually changed my major. Surprise, surprise. I was in curriculum and instructional leadership, but now I'm in leadership, instructional technology, which really just fits me way better than curriculum instruction does. And so I'm taking a lot more leadership classes. I'm learning a lot, and it's really insightful to reflect back on past school districts I've worked in and other places that I've worked. For those who don't know, my role was redundant at CAMI. So now that is a past tense. I am unemployed for just over a week now. This has been for the first time in almost a decade. Or 2 decades. I am unemployed, which is a weird experience. So I've been really diving into my getting to know me, the resumes and cover letters, doing my homework during the weekday so I could actually show up on the podcast during the weekend. So I'm learning a lot. I'm learning a tremendous amount, not just in school, but in real life right now.
Yeah. I think the world we live in, though, is it's all about the shift, and doing different things. And on that, though, I think that the guest that we're hearing from is going to also provide context and insight on that, because this person has done a lot of different things and a lot of different shifting. And this guest was somebody, and just for context, I'm super excited about this because she didn't know it at the time, but she influenced me when I was back in the social studies classroom, with respect to really how I was really learning about what students know and what does that look like in a grade book, right? And what does that look like? How do we make that more equitable, more fair? And so I'm super pumped about this. So our guest is a recovering perfectionist, assessment reform advocate, and educating consultant dedicated to transforming how we do teaching and learning. She's from I believe the Massachusetts area, but she did mention earlier that she's maybe more native New Yorker. And so, everyone can fact check me on this. But I think the Massachusetts piece is the Massachusetts State Coordinator for Educators Rising, which, Sophie, you and I have talked about Educators Rising in the past. I was there. I got to meet this individual in person, which I was super pumped about. It's also a COO of Mastery Portfolio. She champions standard-based and competency-based learning, taking the emphasis off grades and focusing on metacognition and feedback through the formative assessment process. Friends, help me welcome the amazing Starr Sackstein. Welcome, Starr.
Thank you so much for that. You were close on the bio. I'm from New York. I live in Florida. Florida right now, because that's a unique experience. And my role in Massachusetts balances out my Florida. So we kind of have, that kind of duality going on, living in the South and really feeling more like a New Englander in my heart.
That's
I love it that you are a recovering perfectionist.
Yes.
Same.
It's hard too. It's, if you think about what they teach you about addiction in different situations, I feel like perfection is that perfectionism is definitely like that, the obsession to have to outperform myself over and over and over and over again. The older I get, the more grace I have with myself and the less desire I have to be perfect. I think I lean into my quirks a little bit more than I did in my youth at this point, and really don't care as much what people think about me anymore. That's the joy of aging. Not
And
caring.
that seems to be the same for everybody that I've communicated with about this whole perfectionism thing. It's like, as you get older, it will get less. And yeah.
Well, Sophie, I'd be lying if I said that like it goes away completely. It is still something I fight with inside of myself, but at the same time, I think joy is a little bit more important than perfection. And so I kind of lead with adventure and joy and like lean into things that feel good now instead of just trying to be the best at everything. Like, not that I don't care about that. It's just being the best or just under it is really, there's really no difference, honestly. So you do what you can.
True. 100% true.
Yeah, I don't know if Sophie considers me a perfectionist.
Definitely not.
She would, but so and maybe Sophie can maybe like push back on this, but like I think that I'm the perfectionist in the sense of I care deeply about the interactions that I have with people and the impact that I make. So sometimes what does keep me up at night is like, I should have done this certain thing in that situation, or maybe I should have like designed something a certain way instructionally to help my learners, right? Like, so like to me, that's what keeps me up at night, and kind of like, you and then you just go through that, Starr, you know what I'm talking about, like that spinning cycle, right? Of just like
Yep.
all of these different ways, but then I don't always lean into like, oh, well, actually, this is a learning moment, instead of like dwelling on that one thing.
Yeah, I don't know if I would define that as bad as, but I think if that's perfectionism, then I'm still in that in some level, because you want to do right by people. You want to do the best that you can, but I sometimes feel like when you're in those situations, that's like the opportunity, the learning moment, like you said. So as long as you apply what you've learned in that experience and not make the same mistake again in the future, then it was there just for what it was there for, and now you're better the next time you go. And that's all we could really be in life, right? Like just a little better every single day. That's the best we can do.
Yeah. Yeah. We are totally not on the normal format for the show. Like we just like naturally like boom, boom, boom. So love that. But so Starr, we have plenty to talk about. But
Sure.
Just for those that are not familiar with your work, you are an author. You have I've read one of your books. Just a little bit of context for folks on like, how you got into education and just the work that you've done.
And I mean, I'm always touched when I find out that something I've written has really impacted the folks that are, and they could bring that into that classroom, because that's why I did the writing. It took me a long time to get to a place where I systematized the things that I was doing in my space. And if I could help even just one person, then that's the best of it. So I started my career as a New York City public school teacher in a long time ago, a long time ago, maybe like the early 2000, like 2001, I think was my first year of teaching. And I was working in a really high needs school in New York City. I had no idea what I was doing. I did to my students what was done to me, just like most young folks do in that scenario. I spent a few years at that school, and there were lots of challenges at that school, but because I started there, it really put a foundational understanding of believing that all kids can, and really working very hard to change people's impression of the students that I taught, because we were one of New York City's 10 most violent schools. We're going back a long ways. And my kiddos, my friends would be like, "Oh my God, aren't you afraid to work there?" I'm like, "No, they're just kids. They're just kids, and they're actually pretty protective of me." Once they knew I wasn't going anywhere, they went from hazing me every single day to like fiercely protecting me for the time that I was there. And I'm still in touch with so many of those kids. Well, they're grown-ups now, like legit grown-ups with children and lives and stuff. But it was definitely foundational in where I started to see my calling in education. I'd done a short stint after that on Long Island in a pretty affluent school district, similar to what I grew up in on Long Island, and hated it. Like, parents were all up in my business all the time, and they had, like, back then it was like community bulletin boards were just like a thing online, and I had parents calling me a tree hugging hippie, and this woman wants to take our kids to protests and all these things that, they were just really not interested in me giving their children voice in the spaces because they had plans for their kids that I was wrecking with my ideas in class, I think. So I quickly went back to the city after that and spent the rest of my teaching time in New York City. And the school I was in the longest, WJPS, I was there for 9 years, and that's where all the innovations started. Small school, lots of space. I did my national board certification. After national board certification, like, all of that metacognitive reflecting of my teaching naturally led into what was happening in my classroom. I was like, that was so awesome. I learned so much more about myself than any observation feedback I ever got up till that point. So, how do I bring that metacognitive process into my classroom while also lessening the impact of grades? Because something I noticed as a writing teacher is as soon as you put a grade on something, the learning ends. They think they're done. And as a writing teacher, I was like, friends, your writing is never done. Like, that's just a reality. As an author myself, I could look at something I wrote 10 years ago and it's published, but I'm not happy with it anymore because I'm in a different place than I was 10 years ago and my ideas about things have changed. So theoretically, everything is ever evolving. And so if we want kids to be lifelong learners, we need to put systems in place that nurture that concept, and grading them does the opposite. So all of that started happening at WJPS, and I was also really deeply involved in the Journalism Education Association at that time, and was doing a lot of work with journalism. And I don't know, when you're a journalism facilitator, you're running a newspaper, you naturally let kids be in charge of things because that's what you do. And after really having these amazing setups in my newspaper classes, I'm like, why am I not doing this in my AP Lit class? Why am I not doing this in my regular English classes? And sure enough, by the time I left the classroom, I was co-constructing curriculum from day one with my students. They were designing projects. They were in charge of what that learning looked like. And we weren't using grades at all. We were doing assessment conferences with portfolios, and it was brilliant. Like, I looked forward to it as much as they did, and all of my learners, regardless of where they were on a spectrum, knew their value as learners in this space, and everybody brought something unique to it. So that's if you read Hacking Assessment, that's where all of that kind of grew out of, because I was looking for ways to help other people not step in the same business. I know I was warned not to say any potty language, but I stepped in plenty of business in the ways of making mistakes and getting in trouble along the way. And if I could help people find a system faster than I did, it took me probably about 3 years of iterating to come to a place where I could actually systematize it in writing.
Yeah. Yeah. I just always have appreciated your like emphasis on what a grade could actually do that is damaging.
Yes.
Right? Because that's so counter. Like, if you're somebody if you're a parent, and because this is the what I would get, like, they would send their kids into my classroom and they're like, all the questions, concerns, sometimes backlash, right? Kind of like what you're describing. But then when I actually explain to them what we've been doing and how it's actually not good for their child, they're like, oh, I've never even thought about it that way. And now you're positioning yourself, if you do work like this, so you're not just educating the student, you're educating the family, you're educating the community, which is super powerful.
Mhm.
It really is. And I mean, honestly, when if anybody goes on my YouTube channel and listens to students talking about their learning, like I was at Mass Q this week and I played one of the videos as a part of my session, and I like the looks on people's faces, and I would say, would you say that that's more powerful than a final exam or a final research paper? If you could have a student who could talk about their learning in that kind of depth, wouldn't you value that over telling them what they got in your class? Like, how reductive is that in terms of what learning actually is? I don't know. We have to do it differently. That way just doesn't encapsulate everything that learning is. And I think that we need to start expanding our concept of what all of those things are, so that everybody could kind of live up to their own potential, see it and achieve it.
And you hit it on the head when, like, you give it a grade, they're like, okay, I'm done. Or and I'm doing it now in my doctoral program. I'm looking at the rubric and doing what I need to do to get the highest possible score. But am I actually doing it to continue learning? I'm doing it because that is me. I love to learn.
Mhm.
So I'm doing that for myself. But like, I'm doing it to get this high score. And then like, that is it. And I appreciate the feedback. I have one professor that I absolutely loved because she was blunt and direct. And then she was also encouraging on like, you did this, you did this, you did this, but you didn't do this. So next time you're going to, and like that type of feedback made the next assignment better for me. Some professors don't do that. And so the feedback, and I'm big on feedback. I'm huge on feedback. I have lots of, in a previous life videos and activities on providing effective feedback. And the more feedback you provide, the less teaching you're actually going to be doing and reteaching. And sorry, I was actually going down this line to get to the point of there are kids that are just going to do whatever you say to get the high score. And there are kids that actually are going to learn. And I think you sort of hit it right on the head, because I've been in the same situation with you where like this is a school that is, yeah, and then this is a school where the parents are all up your butt. And I've been there. And I enjoyed the school with, just like you, I enjoyed the schools where I was making those connections with the kids and I was helping them see that, like, and when you become their person, yeah, that's the type, when they're like, I've never learned in a math class before because of the student-centered approach, because of the collaboration. That's extremely powerful. And those kids, like you, I'm still connected with them and they have babies and it makes me feel old.
Well, I'm definitely getting on the old side, but I will say that there is nothing better than hearing a student who walked into your class saying, I'm not a reader or I'm not a writer, and they have personal commitment and reflection around the fact that they are both of those things. And it's really just because there was such a narrow definition of what they were when they started, that once you expand what it means to be a reader, a writer, a math student, a historian, whatever the content is, when we show them that they can be all of those things, you see the light bulb go on in a way that I think that is the best dopamine hit you can get as a person experiencing those aha moments around adolescence. It's like, yeah, that feels good. How do I make that happen all the time in class? For sure.
It's interesting for me because in the last like year or so, I've been in front of 3 different types of subgroups. One, just teachers and leaders. The other one, and I shouldn't say just, but teachers and leaders. The other is high school students, right? So I did CTE Edu Pathway for a little bit. And then now I'm exclusively in front of pre-service teachers. So very different, vantage points within
Sure.
the education space. And all of them, when they see what I have to offer and like my mindset with all of the stuff that we're talking about, almost all of them say, "Oh yes, change needs to happen." So it's not like people don't like some people are sitting there like, "Oh, I disagree with this. I want to keep it the way it was for the last like however many 100 years ago since the Industrial Revolution, right?" But Star, my question is like, things are still the same though.
Unfortunately.
So yeah, so like I guess like
Like,
how do we move that needle if so many people are like, at least people that I've encountered are like, yeah, let's change it. Where
yeah, is
where are
it?
the roadblocks and where do we go?
So honestly, it's like at first for me, it was like a one classroom at a time. If I could win the heart and mind of one teacher who reads my book, who wants to be that lone wolf in their school and like do the things I was doing the way that I was doing it, that's who Hacking Assessment was really written for. And then the second edition of Hacking Assessment, I very intentionally started adding leadership tips in there because if you have
Mm,
a rogue teacher in your space and you want to support and encourage that innovation, like here are things that you could very intentionally do to support those folks, especially if you're not ready to make it systemic. Um, in my utopian universe here, I would see that whole system structures would change. The day wouldn't be an 8 to 2 situation where they're going to 9 different classes a day and everything was completely siloed. And like I see a truly
mm,
interdisciplinary learning experience where kids are learning concepts and different, like obviously in the elementary level they do need a level of foundational understanding before you could start connecting all of these things, but once they get to third, fourth, fifth grade, when they have those foundational understandings, they know how to read, they know how to do the important parts of the building blocks, we need to stop separating learning and actually create real world project-based learning experiences that really intentionally take all of the pieces and put them together, and then use a portfolio like assessment where kids are setting their own goals, they understand the objectives, and therefore can assess themselves appropriately based on those things. And then we just have these really authentic kind of like defense of my learning, especially like in a perfect world, we wouldn't have to put grades on a report card. It would just be feedback and maybe mastery level of where they are in certain concepts. And if we're using competencies that span one classroom, then they're, where are they in their growth in that competency area over the
mm.
course of all their classes, and what mastery level are they at this time, and we're using language instead of numbers. And I think like that would be the most ideal, and teachers be treated the same way. I think that the evaluation system that we use for teachers is also kind of broken and antiquated because we create all this fear about coming into classrooms. And in some states I've learned recently, they don't even get observed. It's like 3-year cycles. Once you get tenured, no one is required to come into your room for 3 years. And it was not like that in New York. With tenure, you went from, having to have 3 full observations as well as partial observations where they're coming in at random parts in your class for 15 minutes. Like you could elect, do I want a full period formal observation or do I want to do these snapshots instead? But I was blown away that some districts in different states don't actually have to observe people for 3 years. And I'm like, well, I hope you have a really robust learning walk cycle that you've got going on, or, you're walking through classrooms so that teachers are growing and setting their own professional goals. And even though you don't have to evaluate them, you're still giving them feedback every month, right? And you like,
Y- yes and no.
it wasn't even yes and no. It was just like a flat, what?
No.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like we
Yeah.
focus on the people because they're not used to having people in their rooms, and the union will say, I was like, whoa, let's pump the brakes here. Let's take formative feedback out of the evaluation process, every learner, adult or student, deserves to grow. And you're not going to grow unless people are in your space giving you feedback on what you're doing so that you could do better. Because people like us on this podcast right now, most teachers aren't like that, where they have this internal drive to just keep getting better and better. Like, I knew when I started, I didn't want to just be a good teacher. I wanted to be memorable. I wanted to be the teacher that when someone asked somebody later in life when they were 50, who was the teacher that made the biggest impact in your life? I wanted Sackstein to be the first name on their mouth. The second, like, it was not even something they thought about. It was just, you know, whether it was because they could feel my care, or because my class was just different than everybody else's, or because they felt the best about themselves in that space. But what I've learned too is not everybody's like that. So everybody does need feedback and support, you know?
Correct. And all three of us have been in this professional learning space, right? So
Right.
I would hope that all three of us would very much shake our heads when we say the most difficult student that's out there are teachers.
Oh my God, yes.
Yes.
Which
Hands
is
down.
kind of wild if you think about it, right? If you sit down and think about that, wait, the most difficult ones are teachers themselves, right?
Yeah. And just like a doctor is the worst patient, like it's like, because they think they know enough to like take care of themselves. They think they know enough to teach themselves that they're doing fine just the way they are. There are a few things that you mentioned that I'm just like, now a lot of things I was just like, yes, I want to say this, but then like it's gone now. ADHD brain, it's gone. But the whole all learners should have some sort of feedback going on. And I found that switching from a traditional classroom to a student-centered classroom is scary for teachers because they weren't taught that way. They've never seen it happening in real life because they're in their own classroom. They can't go next door all the time to like see what's happening. And so it's scary for them to let go of the reins, to let go of being the sage on the stage. To let go is fearful. Like they're full of fear when they go into situations trying to do the student-centered situation, or if their leadership is trying to make that more of a thing. But it's a whole mind shift. It really is, to go from I'm teaching you, you're gonna like just memorize this, I'm up here, to curiosity, to questioning, to
see this. Oh wait, wrong arm.
Oh, it's so good.
Oh, I love it.
Yep.
To like, you got to get the curiosity, you got to ask the questions. And one of the best things I did to kickstart my student-centered was I never gave them an answer.
That's the way.
I always asked a question. They're like, is this right? And I'm like, I don't know. Is it? Did you check it? Because I was a math teacher, right? I was math and science. I'm like, does it make sense? And they were like, duh! And they would go away so mad because they were so used to, like, you had to retrain the kids too, because they're so used to just give me the steps, I'll do it. Just give me the answer, I'll do it. And I'm like, no. And it was harder for the students who just wanted the procedure to change than it was for the students with the most needed supports. The students with the IEPs that needed the more support thrived in that student-centered classroom more than the ones that were A students because they were good at memorizing a routine.
So to that point, Sophie, most of those A students, if we're looking at sheer intellectual capacity, they aren't the smartest students. We have a lot of kids in our class who are very capable, who choose not to engage in the game, and therefore don't, on paper, look as smart as the other kids when we're in this grade world. But when we remove the grades, we enhance the passion and interest level to really make sure curiosity is happening, you see those students where everyone's like, this kid's clearly not living up to their potential. Like, you see the potential a lot more because they don't need to play the game. So when you change the game in your space and empower kids to just be a part of what's happening in the space, you find that all learners, with the exception, same thing, honor students, the worst. They just want to be told what to do. How do I get an A? That's how I want to do it. And when I would say to them in my AP class, well, let's look at what success looks like. How does that take shape in what you're trying to do? And when they come back to me with a revision with, how, I was like, whoa, 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 pump the brakes. This doesn't raise your grade just to do, like, I mean, we're trying to build skills here. You're doing these revisions so that you could build a muscle that's going to help you further in the future. You're not doing it for some more points to make your grade better, because you're going to forget everything if that's your motivation. You're not internalizing any of it. And I could say that with authority because I was one of those kids, like very much so, when I was in high school. And what I remember is the feeling of getting 1 point higher than the kid that sat behind me in French class every single time. Ask me what I actually learned in that class. I have no idea. I mean, I have some recollection of my French language experience, but I just remember Seth Liebenstein, who sat behind me, and he'd be like, "What'd you get on this test?" And he'd be like, 89. I'd be like, 90. And no, and the two of us would go back and forth every single time. And I was always 1 point higher, which was funny, but irrelevant. And I think that whole testing phenomena, when kids would come into my class and be like, "What did you get on that last test?" And then I would flip the story like, "Well, what was it on? What did you learn? What was that actually assessing you on?" And none of them could tell me. I was like, "Friends, the score that you got on it is a hell of a lot even less relevant if you don't even know what you were being assessed on."
But what's the point?
Yeah,
Yes, that's how I got there, Steve. Like, what is the actual point of all of this? What
And-
are we trying to achieve?
And so this is how it used to happen to me. I taught senior level government economics. Students would straight up opt to go take AP government, AP, to avoid my class. I was in AP. It was the normal government econ class. They're like, no. AP is actually easier than Martinez's class. And I would always ask, like, dude, this is not, because there wasn't homework, right?
Right.
There wasn't like, and the kids eventually they opened up. They're like, it's because the level of thinking we have to do in here far surpasses what we do in AP. And then it made me think, I'm like, well, then why are we still doing that in AP? Like,
Well, I actually petitioned the College Board one year after, but like I had, like my students were clearly doing in my AP class. I taught AP Lit, and
Mhm.
they did a 15-page research paper at the end of a school year, which was essentially their last chance to show me everything that they had learned over the course of the year. Like, if you didn't reach the level of mastery that you wanted to reach, this one assignment and all of the process leading up to it will hit on all of the essential standards you need to be able to demonstrate. And I petitioned the College Board. I was like, could my class submit their final research paper instead of having to take this test? They'll still pay the readers, they'll still do all of those things, but I think that this assignment is more indicative of what a college level English class is going to ask them to do than a multiple choice test will ever do. Because half of those questions too, and I showed these to my colleagues at one point, I like gave a lit test to my colleagues, and half of them couldn't pass it. It's so convoluted with read this through a Marxist lens, because you really teach that in your high school class, or read this through, like, I mean, it's the kind of stuff I had to do in my college practice, my my licensure praxis to teach English when I almost never taught that until the very, very end of their senior year in an AP class. And the only reason I did it was because I knew they were going to have to know it for the test. Developmentally, most readers in high school don't have the capacity to both comprehend British literature from the 17th and 18th century and also think about it through a particular critical lens. Like, that's a lot like to get them to think about all at once if they're never actually taught what those lenses, like what each of those theories of thought are and how that influences the way we read something in a context, when most of them are just used to using their own context when they read, which is perfect. I mean, that's how literature should be taught in high school. Like, some of these texts that we're reading hundreds of years after they're written, when you're using a scholarly reading of that versus how it plays in today's society when you read it, like, why aren't they right when they could make contextual connections to things that are just different in this world than they were when it was written? So it was like, if you could prove it, I'll say it's right as far as I'm concerned. Find somewhere in the text that substantiates what you're suggesting, and done and done.
I love that.
Yeah.
That was something like poetry and things that are like, how is this interpreted? What did they mean? I'm like, well, I think it means this. Wrong. I'm like, what?
You have to interpret it the exact same way.
I was like, what? Which is also the struggle in the math classroom too. There's more than one way to solve the problem. The way that you came about it, I had a group of kids that solved this problem, did everything right, but went the long way about it. And I was like, brilliant, good, you did it. You guys, they were geniuses. And you went I said, but there's another way to do it. See if you can find it. And so then they ended up finding like the shortcut, but on their own. I didn't have to tell them. I'm like, you went, later I was like, you guys went the long way first, which is totally fine. You learned more going the long way than anybody else did going the shortcut way. And I said, bravo, good job.
It is a way.
It is a way.
It is a way.
It is a way. And the way, and the fact that this was a longer way to do it doesn't mean that it's wrong. Because you did it, you still did it right. Like, all the math is right, all the logic is right, everything you did was still right. It was still good. And so I was like, you learned more, and they needed that challenge anyway. So I just let them keep going down that path. And it's fascinating. Like, for them to just think like, this is how you do it because the teacher said so, not just in math, but in literature too. Like, I always struggled with that.
Yeah. And as I think a lot of them do as well, like, especially like getting back to what you were saying before, Steve, like right now with AI too, when we think about what we're asking kids to know and how they go about knowing it and what's going to be like, before it was, what can't be Googled to be an answer. Now we have something that's far more sophisticated than Google. So how do we make learning experiences both authentic and rigorous, and, as Michael Hernandez might say, uncheatable? Like these ideas of making something that they don't want to put into ChatGPT, or how do we incorporate that into the process where it's like, well, I have an expectation that your first draft is actually going to come out of an AI situation, but then I want you to write all over it, make your revisions, and your final draft, which you'll attach the AI draft first. And my friend Elaine, who works at the college level, is doing that with her writing courses at the college level, forcing them
Brilliant.
to use the tool and not running away from, like, shying from the fact that they're doing it anyway. So why not teach them to query it well, and then how to go back through and check what comes up, and then go back to the text and find those textual pieces of evidence that you need to substantiate the claims that they might have created for you if you're putting those things in. And I think that you can co-create with AI at this point and then have ownership of the stuff that you've written because you've checked everything that's in there. You have your own sources and your own evidence. So it's irrelevant that your first draft came from a query.
Right. That's good. That's good.
And sorry, Steve,
Go ahead.
but I'm going to take
go
over.
ahead. Go ahead.
And then like to know your content enough to know if the AI is hallucinating. So it's not just about the first draft came from AI, but you're actually reading it and analyzing it, and you're doing more than you would have if you actually wrote it the first time.
That's right. Those critical thinking skills.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Mm.
Because it's been hallucinating with me a couple of times on some of my work. I'm like, no, that did not sound like you are false. That was not said in there. Not in my doctoral work. It was with something else. I'm like, that was not said in that. You need to like go back and look again.
Sophie, I love that you use that word hallucinating. Like I've never heard that before, but like that's such a good way to put what that experience is like. Because I'm like, oh yeah, that's happened to me.
Yeah, I came across it on social media. I really love it. It's AI hallucinations, where it literally makes up something that sounds right, and it sounds like what you want to hear, but it's not right whatsoever. And it told me, I'm like, okay, look again, because this phrase, I don't think that phrase is in. It had to do with like my feedback and evaluations and stuff. And I was like, pull out this really good stuff, and it's like, here, this is something someone said about you. And I was like, did they really? And I was like, where can I find that? And I'm like, dude, it's not in here. And he's like, I totally hallucinated that. And I was like, you did. But yeah, you've got to know what you're talking about in order to analyze the AI. And if you're using AI in the foundational levels, then you're to like do the foundational stuff, then yeah, that's cheating. But if you're using AI and to then critique it and enhance it and analyze it to see like, then you're actually applying some high level critical thinking and analysis skills.
And people like me who write a lot, I mean, I use it now. It makes the first draft a lot easier. It makes the whole process easier. Those days of staring at a blank page is just not a thing anymore because you could throw something. So, I mean, think about those students who really do struggle with a first draft. Like bonus that they're not actually starting with nothing now. If they have ideas, they could just put their ideas in and start there. And if they don't know where to start, then a quick query just for starting is, to me, use the tools that you have. I've never really been afraid of the technology. Like over the course of the years, my students have been way ahead of me in a lot of different areas. And I'm not a person whose ego has to fill a space. So if the kids know something I don't and it works for them, I want to learn it so that I could help other students more. And it's sort of like, if like they're using a tool that is working for them. And that's kind of how social media wound up in my classroom, even way back in the day, because that's where they had all moved to. So why not have text-based conversations on Twitter across classrooms with a hashtag before Twitter became a cesspool of everything? But it was very good while I was in the classroom, and now I would wonder what new platform I would use if I was still in the English classroom and not working with teachers exclusively at this point.
Not TikTok.
No, not TikTok.
Not TikTok.
TikTok scares me. Like
I feel like so I'm gonna take a quick little side quest here. Like I feel like on social media, it's like a lot of things right now. There's too many of them where it's like, where is the space? Actually, Sophie knows this. I presented this week at my county office to students that they have their own podcast. Oh. So I went in and just presented on like how I do it, metrics, the Spotify metrics, StreamYard, all that stuff. And they brought up a good question, like what is the social media place that gets a lot of traffic? I'm like, at least in my opinion, it's hard to answer. Like, there are a lot of teachers kind of on TikTok. X has become like not a lot are on there. Blue Sky,
Blue Sky, yep.
is that the right one?
That
Yeah.
is
The
the
pod
one.
has a Blue Sky. I have a Blue Sky. It
I have
seems
Blue
kind of
Sky.
quiet. Yeah, but it seems kind of quiet though, right? It's not like,
It's like
and
old Twitter, though.
yeah,
It is.
but it doesn't have that. I don't think anything will have that Twitter energy
Old
that
Twitter
used to be.
energy.
Yeah,
Old.
that used to. Yeah, old, right? Like that was different.
Well, Twitter's feeling like foreign brides and pornography and other kinds. Like that's why I left Twitter, because I started getting spam of the most ridiculous kind that I was
So
just
much spam.
no thanks.
Yeah.
And the far right ideology that didn't align with my beliefs and a lot of the things that were on there, I was just like, I can't abide this. And I had more than 30,000 followers on Twitter when I deleted my account. So it was like, that's a huge audience that took me at least a decade to build. With each one of the books that I put out or different things that I had going
Yeah.
on. But I was like, that's not where I want people to find me anymore. That's just not a space that is safe or productive anymore. So it's time
Yeah.
to go. And now LinkedIn is, I think, pretty much my primary and only one that I'm active on at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
I think there's like a lot of learning going on LinkedIn. And then the places I'm also finding are like in more private places. Like I'm in a private Slack that is about like accommodations and accessibility and like UDL basically.
Mhm.
And not just that, but like the bylaw accommodations and making things accessible, like websites and what all that jazz. And then there's little community groups that are meeting off of, like they're doing Zoom meetings, they're doing collaborations, not on a social media platform. I'm not seeing
Yeah.
like the Twitter chats and like the I'm just not seeing that happening as much.
Yeah.
No.
That's true. That's true. I'd feel bad, Star, if we didn't ask you about Educators Rising.
Okay.
And so like Educators Rising is still fairly new to me. It wasn't until I got into the CTE space where like, wait, there's this thing that is very energetic. And so
I had all
what
the
is
questions when Steve was talking to me about it.
yeah, no, so okay, so start. So like a little bit of context. I came back from Florida and I was pumped. I was like, oh my God, there's this cool space that solves many different problems if it can expand and grow, which I think it is, and I think it has. And she was just like all the questions, like just like, wait, like what could they do out there? And like, and because I ended up, and Star, I think I mentioned I judged out there too,
Uh-huh.
which was another layer of the excitement, just seeing students shine in that way, right? So for those that are listening, like, wait, what the heck is he talking about? What is Educators Rising,
Sure.
and what is kind of the work that they work on?
Sure. So it's interesting that you felt like going to the conference was the thing that got you in. The year before, they had their conference in DC, and I was there as one of the distinguished fellow. Like PDK has a distinguished fellow program, so I was honored as a distinguished fellow through PDK, and it was the first Educators Rising conference I had been in. And at that time, you know, ISTE and ASCD were still merging. Things were kind of changing in that. And ASCD had kind of been my go-to organization for my entire career. They've published a bunch of my books, and I have not missed an ASCD conference ever since I started teaching, 25 years ago. And I came into PDK's conference for Educators Rising, and I was like, this could be my new home. Like, this could be my new space. The excitement from the students that were there, because it also is really reminiscent of my journalism days, because all of my journalism conferences that I was going to also was with students. It wasn't just educators. So having that excitement of future educators at the high school and middle school level, being at this conference, leading sessions, participating in sessions, competing in these events, these super articulate young people who are so pumped about going into education. And there are more than 50 different ways they could compete, like at the conference. And we have state level conferences that they have to go through first, where they're competing on the state level before they go to nationals. So that's sort of like my role as Massachusetts state coordinator, is to run a program for the state where I am supporting students who are in CTE pathways who want to be educators at some point in their lives. And it's not just classroom educators. Part of our curriculum also talks about the varied career choices and pathways you could have within education, because obviously there's a pipeline issue right now. There aren't enough people going into education. Our profession is kind of being deprofessionalized by a lot of outside forces. So trying to reinvigorate with young people who are excited about education, who have had the kinds of experiences that made all of us want to become teachers. They actually have one competition called the Educator Rising Moment, where students give a public talk about what that moment they realized they wanted to be an educator was. It's one of the few open competitions you could go to. And if you're ever at a conference, that's the kind of room where you need a box of Kleenex when you walk in there. And like every single one of them, regardless of if they win or they don't, will pull on your heartstrings about the reasons they want to be a teacher. And I don't know, I was so moved. And now the work that I'm doing in the state of Massachusetts, I basically help schools set up chapters. I work as a liaison between the state DESE, the state education department, and all of the education organizations in the state. So I partner with MASCO, which is the school counselors organization, the MTA, which is the union. They have an aspiring ed section called SEAM. So the SEAM people and me work together very closely, because my students go directly into their program if they stay in the state. But really what we seek to do is get them credentialed faster. They're going through all of these, the CTE pathway, they're having apprenticeship and internship opportunities while they're still in high school, so that if they have dual enrollment credits aligned for the courses that they're in, instead of taking 4 years to get their credentials, they could get it down to 2 years. And hopefully, if they're growing their own, they've created this atmosphere in their schools where they want to go back to the schools that they taught, that they learned in first. So it's this whole idea of creating your own local pipeline, where then your educators start to look like the community that they're teaching. So it's fixing that diversity problem where there aren't enough teachers of color in those spaces that really match the students that they're teaching. That's certainly part of the way that we're trying to do things, so that we have these authentic communities being represented in the spaces. And we're also getting more folks into education, regardless of what their entry point is. So like we have connections with ETS. So we offer reduced price for the Parapro exam. So you could theoretically be a licensed Parapro by the time you finish high school. So you could keep working at school at the institution that you came out of while you're getting your credentials in other ways as well. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful program. And my student leaders in the state are kind of my favorite reason to run a state level position like this. Since I'm not in a classroom anymore, just being around really hyper motivated kids who help me do everything. Like we have, we're going to be doing a conference on the west side of the state, November 7th in Massachusetts. And it's a leadership symposium. Every session in that conference is being led by students at varying levels. So some of my student leaders are running them. We have student leaders from other CTSOs in the state. Massachusetts has this great program, MASSER, which is Massachusetts Association of Student Representatives. So in Massachusetts and around the country, we have students sitting on school boards so that their voice is represented in the school board conversation. So they are presenting about advocacy, how students could start to advocate younger and younger and have their voices heard at the table with the adults. And I mean, Massachusetts is doing some phenomenal things for the education profession. I'm not saying it's perfect, but there's a reason they always rank in the top 10 in terms of places to work. And I joked at the beginning that Massachusetts balances my Florida, but like they really do value, like they value educators in a way that you don't see in every place. And I really enjoy getting to know the educators of Massachusetts and seeing their programs and helping them with resources wherever I can to make their lives easier. I think that's important too. If I could take some of the burdens off them and help them run their programs more smoothly.
Yeah. The big takeaway I have with all of that is like, it takes student centeredness to a whole different level, right? Like student centered mindsets, approaches, they're not just for the classroom, right? Like what you're talking about is like, when you talk about them serving on a board, like that's really cool. That's powerful.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's like I said, I think that if I didn't have the mindset that I had coming into this job, there might be other coordinators in other states that plan their conferences alone and do all the things. But I'm of the mind that these conferences are for the kids. The kids know what the kids want more than what the old woman wants. So it's sort of like, how do I ensure that students want to keep coming to these events? You go to the people who know what the students want, the students, right? And then I just
Yep.
have to find a way to make it happen. Like, tell me what you want and let me see what I can do to make that a reality.
Yeah. Love that. So we're at that time where because we're grossly out of time, but Starr, we do have this question that we ask everyone at the very end. And so it could be something that you've already talked about, right?
Okay.
Maybe you can double click on something, or it could be something brand new that hasn't been discussed yet. But right now, what is under the hat for you? What is top of mind in education?
I think for me, it's always about equity. It's always about making sure that all kids have what they need and spaces are spaces of belonging, and that we are creating environments in schools, not just in single classrooms, but in whole institutions that see our learners as humans. And regardless of what their background is, and regardless of all the outside noise, at the end of the day, the spaces we create need to be safe spaces for everyone who shows up there, students and teachers alike, adults and students. And I think that even though my work with assessment didn't necessarily start out with that equity focus at top of mind, it was a really awesome side effect of the things that I was doing. And it wasn't until I started doing a lot of other research and reading other things people were doing where I was like, oh, what I'm doing really is equitable. And this does give just about every, person in this space a voice. And maybe we can call that equity. And I shouldn't shy away from that word, because I have a vision of what that's supposed to look like for other people. So I hope if people take away anything is that you can let go of control. Your students are probably more capable than you even realize. And when you get out of the way and present a culture and an environment that could thrive in, you will see even the ones who disengage all the time starting to re-engage in ways because they feel valued in the space. So that's always a top of mind for me. And when I'm working with teachers, it's getting them to that first aha moment where they don't want to do it any other way. Because I kind of feel like once you see it and you experience what it can be, there's no way you can go back to the way you were doing it before. So I would say that's it. That's what's always at the top of my mind and my heart.
Love that. Starr, I am going to put, for those that are watching the video, I believe that's your website,
It is.
misssackstein.com. Sure, there's tons of resources and findings that they can, self-discover. The book I read, Hacking the Assessment, That's one that really shifted my mind. So highly recommend that for anyone in the education space. But Starr, thank you so much. We learned a ton and just really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. This is awesome. And I got to wear a tiara.
Of course.
So good. So good. Yeah. Awesome.
You don't need a
All right,
special
friends.
occasion to be a queen.
That is, I mean, I have a tutu also that I got on the same birthday. So, I mean, there's like a whole look that goes with this.
Does it light up? Because mine lights up.
There's one that lights up. Now I know.
Yes. Now go look, because it's definitely worth it.
Oh, look.
Awesome.
Starr may or may not be on Amazon later.
Yeah.
Starr is probably already thinking about that and what that could look like for sure. Yes.
Yeah. Great. Awesome, friends. All right. We're wrapping this up. No pod next weekend. I'm out at a conference, but we'll be back the weekend after. Thank you all for listening, watching, however it is you're catching this pod. Until next time, keep your hats on, but your minds open. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.